I'm Congressman Adriano Espaillat. I know it's hot late in the day, but we're here because a crime is being perpetrated in that building. Whenever you cut healthcare severely, the way it's attempted to be cut today, people's lives are in danger. Seniors' lives are in danger. Children's lives are in danger. Mothers' lives are in danger. Everyone's lives are in danger when cuts of this nature are being perpetrated like they are today. When food stamps is being cut, the health of people is also in danger because nutrition is health. So when nutrition assistance programs are being cut at a record level, more so than ever before in our nation's history, as Medicaid is being cut deeper and more so than ever before in our nation's history, we must stand here before this occurs and speak out in support of our constituents across the country that depend on these vital programs to survive. And all of this is being perpetrated to give the biggest tax cut to the rich, to the super rich. So this bill is big, of course. It gives the biggest cut in Medicaid in our nation's history, in healthcare. It gives the biggest cut to nutritional programs in our history. And it gives the biggest transfer of wealth from the working class and middle class to the super rich in the history of our nation. Esta rueda de prensa es para hacer un llamado importante para nuestra comunidad, mientras esperamos lo que es una especie de crimen ahí en el Capitolio, donde se dan recortes sin precedente al programa de Medicaid, al programa de los cupones de alimentos, para darle una excepción de impuestos sin precedente a los super ricos, a costilla de la clase trabajadora y la clase media. Por eso estamos aquí, para denunciar eso en el día del aniversario de la Declaración de Independencia, que fue instituida julio 2 del 1726. We are celebrating today the Declaration of Independence, which was drafted on July 2nd, 1776. But this is far from a Declaration of Independence. This will shackle us, our ability to be healthy, our ability to gain nutritional assistance, and our ability to get a recourse here in the U.S. Capitol. Today we have members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to give their view on this ugly bill, and we start with Dr. Raul Ruiz.
Thank you, Chairman Espaillat. This big, ugly bill was made uglier by the Senate. It is an abomination to the nation. It is an insult and injury to working families. As the chairman said, it is the largest cuts to Medicaid in our nation's history, despite promises by Donald Trump otherwise. This is the largest cut to food support programs that will take food away from hungry children, veterans, and seniors in our nation's history. This is the largest tax cut in the billions for billionaires. This is the largest transfer of wealth, the largest robbery of wealth from working families to billionaires. This is the largest increase in the national debt by a bill in our nation's history. This is a horrible bill. This bill will create the largest amount of people uninsured in our nation's history. Not only will people be uninsured, they will have to pay more out of pocket. those 17 million will become uncompensated care at your local hospitals. Hospitals will incur the cost. They will transfer it on to people by increasing premiums, and everybody will pay for that. In addition to this, the 150 billion reduction in payments to hospitals, the 240 billion dollar cuts through the provider tax that states rely on to help hospitals, and due to the increase in uncompensated care, there's going to be 20% of our rural hospitals are going to close. Now think about it. Whether you have Medicare, private insurance, or Medicaid, if you have an emergency, which hospital are you going to go to if they're closed? As an emergency medicine doctor, I know that you have about a 10 to 15 minute window if you're having a heart attack or a stroke to get the care to help prevent long-term damage and to save your life. If you don't have a hospital in your neighborhood, you're going to be at risk for permanent disability or even death. And that's why this bill is so dangerous. Como médico de emergencia, yo puedo decir que va a haber más de 17 millones de personas que no van a tener seguro médico por esta propuesta de ley. Incluso 20% de los hospitales rurales van a cerrar. Cuando no tienen seguro médico y tienen emergencia, van a ir y no van a poder pagar, entonces los hospitales van a pagar esos costos. Eso quiere decir que muchos no van a tener los hospitales en su comunidad. Como médico de emergencia, yo puedo decir que las personas tienen unos 10, 15 minutos por si en caso tienen un infarto del corazón o del cerebro, y si no reciben el tratamiento adecuado en ese tiempo, pueden morir o pueden tener disabilidades permanentes. Entonces, esta propuesta de ley es peligroso. Va a aumentar costos para todos y va a poner en riesgo a millones de vidas en este país. Gracias.
As they say in our community, listen to your doctor. And now we're going to hear from Representative Jim Costa from California's 21st District.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The legislation that is being considered today is big, but it's not beautiful. It is a direct impact on the hardworking Hispanic communities that I represent in the San Joaquin Valley, and for almost all of my district, for that matter. If this measure were to pass, 1.8 million people in the San Joaquin Valley that rely on Medicaid, their health care, their safety net would be endangered. In my congressional district, that adds up to over 49,900 constituents that would lose their Medicaid coverage. 35,000 people will lose SNAP benefits. These are not just elderly or people with disabilities. Many of these are the working poor that labor in the fields, labor in trying to ensure that they put food on their family's dinner table every night, but do not make sufficient money to do so. And therefore, the supplemental food that is provided from the SNAP program is absolutely essential. Over 7,200 people in my congressional district would lose their Affordable Health Care Act. And when we talk about the safety net that is being impacted, that benefits less than 30% of America's population, over 40%, and I would stipulate probably over half of my constituents would be impacted. The health care impacts on the safety net that Dr. Ruiz talked about are similar in my area. 61% of the people in the community medical center, the second largest hospital in California, with over 1,200 beds, 61% rely on Medicaid for their reimbursement. And not to mention that we have rural hospitals, again, as was noted by my friend, the doctor, that are significantly in danger of being closed. And in the rural areas of America, certainly in the San Joaquin Valley, you already have complicated challenges of having to drive 30 minutes or an hour to get access to health care. And that's also being threatened at this point in time. So let me close by saying this. Two things are already impacted the people in the San Joaquin Valley. Mass deportation and the tariff issues, because I represent one of the largest agricultural regions in the country. Mass deportations have resulted in less than half of the workforce not going to their jobs every day because they are in fear of being deported. Let me explain that. This is not like working in a factory where you shut down for a week, then you come back and you start working again. When those peaches are ripe, they need to be picked. When those cherries are ready to be consumed, they need to be put in the grocery store. And if you wait a week or 2 weeks, that beautiful product that Americans enjoy at home for their people is no longer available, period. And so you can find the 1-2 punch mass deportations, tariffs that eroded our markets abroad, and this big, ugly bill. And it is a triple punch impacting the people that I represent. That's the reason that we've got to do everything we can to keep this measure from passing and go back to the drawing board. Thank you very much.
Yes, now we're going to listen to Representative Juan Vargas from California's 52nd District.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I want to thank all of my colleagues for being here. This big ugly bill would be devastating for my district. I represent San Diego, the border area, and we've been hit hard because of the immigration rates, ICE. In fact, recently we had 4 men, armed men with machine guns, waiting to arrest a young lady with 3 children as she left the hotel where she works. She thought she was under attack. These men attacked her. She went to the ground. She was crying and screaming. Why? Because she had 3 children at home that didn't know if she was going to come home or not. She wanted to make sure that she could come home for those kids. And what does this do? It gives them hundreds of millions and literally $150 billion to do this some more. And to what? To create also alligator Alcatraz, the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. This is only to humiliate people. It's not really a prison. It's to humiliate people. And that's what they're doing. It's outrageous, and we have to stop it. I know that my colleagues have already spoken about the devastating cuts to Medicaid, but I want to emphasize, when you're on the border, you have a lot of special needs. You have a lot of people in San Diego who have adopted children. They've adopted children throughout the world. And what happens is that they count on Medicaid, they count on some services to be able to adopt these children. And what happens now, they're saying they're going to take this money, this opportunity for them to raise their children away. That's what this big ugly bill does. Why? Simply to give billionaires more money. We have billionaires in San Diego. They're all against it. We don't have a whole bunch, but every billionaire in San Diego is against this bill. One of them said, you know what? This will give me $25 million more next year that I don't need. Why are you guys passing this bill? I said, well, we're not. We're fighting like hell against it. And hopefully we'll stop it today. Tenemos que pelear en contra de este cochino bill. ¿Por qué? Porque yo represento a San Diego. En San Diego, estos cortes a la ayuda médica sería realmente un corte que lastimaría miles de personas ahí. Especialmente, y mucha gente no sabe esto, las personas que han adoptado a niños, que tienen ayuda médica, muchos de esos van a perder esta ayuda. Y no nomás eso, también lo que estamos viendo en San Diego, los arrestos de ICE, de estas personas, ¿y quién son? No son criminales, no son asesinos, son señoras que trabajan ahí en un hotel, como una que salió hace poco, ¿verdad? Ella salió de trabajo, quería regresar a la casa con sus 3 niños, y ahí 4 de ahí de ICE la atacaron. Tenían ametralladoras para que una señora que trabaja en el hotel. Y esto le darían como 150 billones de dólares más para hacer eso. Por eso estamos en contra de este bill. Y gracias por estar aquí a todos mis compañeros. Vamos a pelear en contra de este cochino bill. Gracias.
Así es que se llama cochino bill. Let's call now on our very own Congressman Joaquin Castro.
Thank you, Chairman. This bill is shameful, and it's going to be devastating to so many American communities, and especially the Latino communities, in so many ways, at every age of life. And my colleagues have spoken well to that. And we've spoken over the last few weeks about how devastating the Medicaid cuts would be, the long-term nursing home stays, the cuts to Pell grants, all of these very bad things. But I also want to speak to something that Juan addressed, which is the fact that this is the biggest wealth transfer in American history. They're taking the money not just to give it to billionaires, but to give it to ICE for more raids. The way that ICE is conducting itself, it is terrorizing communities right now. Why do I say that? Because you have people who are carrying guns with no badges, oftentimes not in uniform, not identifying themselves, and snatching people off the street. We've heard mothers wailing as they're pulled away violently because their kids are in school and their kids are going to wonder what happened to them when nobody shows up to pick them up from school. And this bill is going to make it worse. It's going to make it worse because it adds billions and billions of dollars, not just for more ICE agents to go into the streets in more cities and more communities and do exactly that, but they also have made denaturalization a priority. They are going to go to the Latino community, start investigating people, and try to prove that they don't deserve their citizenship. That's what this bill does. It will dedicate billions of dollars for them to go into Latino communities and try to strip people of their citizenship. So it's not a matter of whether somebody is a criminal or not. We've seen now that it was a lie that they were only going to target violent criminals. They targeted the other day a man that had been in this country for 60 years who ended up dying in ICE custody. They're not just going to go after criminals. They're going to go after everyday people living across American Latino communities. So this bill is not only bad and devastating and shameful, but it's also dangerous for our community.
Thank you, Joaquin. And to further speak on this cochino bill, we're going to listen now to Darren Soto from Florida's next district.
President Trump's mass deportation is separating families, raising costs, and wrecking our economy. The one big, ugly bill would allow him to double down on his disastrous policies. Thousands of Florida families are being torn apart right now. Nearly 500,000 humanitarian parolees just lost their legal status. Cubans, Venezuelans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans, and another 400,000 TPS holders, predominantly from Venezuela and Haiti, also had their legal status destroyed. They were contributing to our economy, and Trump took that all away. We've had local families. Someone just mentioned a guy who was in the country 60 years from Cuba in Florida, who just died in ICE custody. The Juarez Miranda family, who was just deported after 24 years in our agricultural area. And now thousands of local citizens in Florida and across our nation are seeing their family members deported. Trump's mass deportation is raising costs, from farms and ranches to restaurants and landscapers, home builders to hotels and theme parks. Major employers and small businesses are losing thousands of employees. Now the cost to grow food, manufacture goods, and go on vacation or go out to eat is going to go up as a result. Add in Trump's tariffs and it makes the costs even worse. Americans are seeing those costs rise in their bank statements every month and their credit card bills every month. And Trump's mass deportation is wrecking our economy. We saw a terrible jobs report today. 33,000 jobs lost this month. When you take away workers, raise tariffs, and cause general chaos, businesses pull back on investment and consumers pull back on spending, which is why we saw a negative 5% growth in the first quarter. And I think we're going to see it be official. I fully expect this next quarter will be negative. And then we will have a recession, or what I like to call a Trump session. If this isn't all bad enough, the one big ugly bill will double down on Trump's failed immigration policies. $150 billion more for ICE? Really? more money for alligator, Alcatraz. They will kick their mass deportation into high gear. They can't seem to deport America's farm workers, cooks, landscapers, cleaning ladies, and construction workers fast enough. And it's driving our nation's economy to ruin. La deportación de presidente Trump está separando familias, creciendo gastos y destruyendo nuestra economía. Y su gran proyecto de ley feo va a tener esfuerzo doble de sus policías de desastres. Miles de familias están separadas. Casi 1 millón de personas haitianas y nicaraguanos, quien era aquí legalmente con TPS o parol humanitario. Trump terminó su estatus legal y ahora nosotros vemos ciudadanos quien tiene sus miembros de su familia quitar. Este está creciendo gastos por comida, por casas, por todos los otros cosas nosotros compramos cada día. Este está afectando empresarios pequeños y empleadores grandes. Y también nosotros tenemos tariff quien está haciendo esta situación más peor. Y también nosotros tenemos una economía que está perdiendo trabajos, perdiendo crecimiento. Y yo creo nosotros vamos a tener una recesión. ¿Por qué? ¿Quién? Porque Trump está tratando para terminar nuestra economía con deportaciones. Y 150 billones de dólares más por ICE, por Alligator Alcatraz. ¿Por qué? Para destruir nuestra economía más. No tiene senso. Y nosotros necesitamos votar no. Y nuestro caucus hispano está unidos en esta oposición. Gracias.
Thank you. Now we're going to hear from California's Congressman Salud Carvajal.
Thank you, Adriano. Let's call this misleading bill what it is. It's a big, ugly betrayal of the American people. That's what this is. And as a Marine, I'm not going to be as polite as my colleagues. This is a bunch of fucking bullshit. Or like we say in Spanish, es una mierda. Families across the country have been struggling with the high cost of essentials like groceries, rent, childcare, and healthcare. This administration should be working in a bipartisan way to resolve these issues. At least that's what the President Trump promised. But the American people have seen completely the opposite. Republicans at the direction of President Trump have decided to cut social programs for the most vulnerable people in our country in order to give billionaires like Elon Musk another tax break they don't need. In their budget bill, Republicans are trying to pass unprecedented funding cuts to healthcare and food assistance programs. In my home district, California Central Coast, these cuts mean over 40,000 people will lose their healthcare, up to 200,000. And 119,000 people that rely on SNAP for food assistance are at risk of going hungry. This is outrageous and cruel. Instead of protecting and strengthening your healthcare coverage and feeding hungry families, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are working to approve these indiscriminate cuts that will cause needless suffering. All for what? To give the richest 1% of Americans the largest tax break in history. Not to mention, it adds over $4 trillion to our national debt. So if I haven't made myself clear, I fundamentally oppose the Republican budget bill. Los republicanos, siguiendo las órdenes de este presidente Trump, han decidido recortar los programas sociales que apoyan a las personas más vulnerables de este país. Todo para dar a los ricos, a los más ricos, otra reducción de impuestos. Esto es cruel e inhumano. Y además, esto aumenta la deuda nacional en 3 a 4 billones de dólares. Así que, si no ha quedado claro, me opongo a este proyecto de ley que es injusto.
Thank you, Salud. Thank you, Salud. And now we're gonna listen from the border, Representative Vicente Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vicente Gonzalez from the great state of Texas. We are here in unity, opposing one of the most atrocious bills in modern American history. A bill that is impacting senior citizens with over $500 billion of healthcare cuts to the elderly, the most vulnerable population in America, $400 billion in Medicaid. Over a quarter of households in my district in southern Texas are impacted by this. This bill leaves 100,000 people at least without health care. It cuts $300 billion in SNAP. That means school lunches, school breakfast, and Meals on Wheels for seniors. These are sometimes the only meals this population gets all day long. But it also empowers this administration with billions of dollars to continue these unlawful, inhumane, un-American raids that are focused on our people, that are devastating the American economy. I spoke with my farmers just last week, a big group that supported President Trump. They were all in opposition to this bill. I spoke with construction companies that are a standstill because they cannot finish their projects because they don't have labor to do so. I spoke with other industries, the hotel industry, the restaurant industry. Everybody is devastated by the raids that are happening across this country in such an inhumane, hyper-aggressive manner. These are working people. There's visuals and clips on TV of them chasing down people with meat eaters in their hands, mowing lawns, doing the dirtiest, hardest work in this country. That is the population that ICE has gone after. And I tell you, Stephen King, Stephen Miller, today it's us, tomorrow it's you. It won't be long before the focus is off us, and it's against you and your people. So it's time for Americans, regardless of what part of the country you are from, or what race or nationality, to speak up against the atrocities that are happening in America. Y le digo a la gente en habla hispana que este es el robo más grande que se ha visto en la historia americana, costando $4 trillones al pueblo trabajador, perdiendo Medicare para la gente mayor, perdiendo Medicaid para la gente necesitada, trabajadora, SNAP, que muchas veces es la única comida que recibe un niño o una persona de tercera edad. Y le digo a Stephen Miller, hoy están persiguiendo a la comunidad latina, pero cuando este enfoque termine, va a ser tu comunidad y va a ser tú el que van a perseguir. Y es hora que se les despierte todo el país, gente que latinos y no latinos, y hablen en contra de las acciones que ha tomado esta administración. Gracias.
Gracias, Vicente. Y ahora vamos a escuchar de la congresista Luz Rivas de California.
Muchas gracias, Chair Espaillat, for gathering us here today. We are back in Washington to stop Republicans' big, ugly bill that will implement the largest cuts to healthcare in our country's history. Over 17 million Americans will be impacted by this big, ugly bill, including 2.3 million Californians. Republicans' cuts to SNAP are cruel and means that kids, seniors, and people with disabilities will go hungry. Also in this big, ugly bill is a blank check for Trump to implement his cruel immigration enforcement agenda that has terrorized our communities and left families living in fear. You know, I represent part of the city of Los Angeles, and I have witnessed firsthand the fears that the community has because of these ICE raids that are happening in our city. This bill means more money for ICE to continue operating without any oversight, accountability, or transparency. It's going to result in more fear, more chaos, more harm on our most vulnerable. This includes people, I've listened to so many stories from people that have been impacted. Andrea Velez, a 32-year-old citizen from downtown Los Angeles who was wrongfully detained by ICE. Narciso Barance, a Marine Corps veteran from California who was beaten by masked veteran agents. and Ambrosio Lozano, an ice cream vendor from California who was placed in an unmarked vehicle and driven to an unknown location despite not having a criminal record. These are all hardworking people who are trying to live out their American to be detained and sent to facilities across the country. We have shown up to ICE facilities across the country and have been stonewalled trying to get answers from them. It's evident that ICE lacks the confidence and humanity to care for our most vulnerable and should not be giving a blank check to implement Trump's anti-immigrant agenda. And that's why I join all our House Democrats to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Luz. And now we're going to listen to Congresswoman Emily Randolph from Washington 6th District.
Gracias, Mr. Chair, for bringing us together, and thank you for being here and telling the story of what's happening in this building today and in our communities across the country. I'm a freshman, and I came to Congress to fight for my neighbors, to make life easier for folks who are just trying to build strong futures. I came from a legislature where I didn't always agree with my Republican colleagues, but where we were able to work together on services for disabled Washingtonians and on expanding Medicaid. I passed a Medicaid expansion by unanimously through the Washington State Legislature, but here in this building, our Republican colleagues are lying to you when they say that people aren't going to lose their Medicaid coverage. Millions of Americans, 17 million Americans stand to lose Medicaid coverage under this bill. In my district, it's over 170,000. But I'm not just worried about the folks in Washington's 6th District. I'm also worried about the people who live in Central and Eastern Washington, who are represented by Dan Newhouse and Mike Baumgartner, who live just like my constituents, far away from healthcare facilities already, who struggle to access healthcare because their independent providers and small clinics are shuttering their doors. Just a few years ago in Washington State, we had to bail out a rural hospital because otherwise people would have to drive hours and hours to access their health care. This bill threatens to tear healthcare away, not only from Medicaid patients, but for folks in rural communities who depend on the hospitals keeping their doors open. From elderly Americans who depend on Medicaid funding and Medicaid funded facilities to access healthcare in the end of their life. This bill is bad for the people of this country. It's dangerous, and we don't have to pass it. I'm calling on my Republican colleagues to be brave right now, to stand up for what's right, and to really dedicate themselves to ensuring that all Americans have the tools that they need to thrive.
Thank you so much, Emily. And now we're going to hear from New Jersey's Congresswoman Nellie Poe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And first, let me just say that I stand here proudly alongside my colleagues for the CHC to speak about this big, bad, ugly bill. We all know, we've heard many of my colleagues talk about what are some of the massive impacts that it will have. Well, let me just share a little bit more, some of which we've already heard, but it is just unbelievable that we are still trying to convince the House Republicans on what an incredibly terrible bill this is. And for them to have the courage to do the right thing, right thing for their constituents, to do the right thing for all Americans. The massive cuts to Medicaid in this bill will unleash catastrophic impacts across America and my district. You know, I heard from a mother in my district who worried that her disabled son won't have Medicaid access when he ages out of her insurance, which will be soon. Another woman in our district shared that she's worried that Medicaid cuts will mean seniors will lose the health care nutrition support, social engagement at their local adult care centers, and that help them live independent and meaningful lives. A father told me that he fears that his adult daughter with a disability will end up homeless if she loses her Medicaid. Without these supports, people will likely have to leave their homes for much costlier institutional settings. Instead of helping the least advantage in our community get by, this bill will take away their health care from 17 million Americans and will make them go hungry. Instead of lowering costs, it will lead to thousands losing their jobs as nursing homes and hospitals will indeed close. Instead of asking billionaires to contribute their fair share, it gives them the tax breaks that they absolutely do not need, and it is just unfathomable. Instead of strengthening the economy, it will balloon the national deficit and cost New Jersey billions of dollars. This is indeed a cruel bill, a bill that is really going to devastate every single American, except for those who are absolutely the wealthiest of our members in our society. They will be just fine. They don't have to worry about whether or not they put food on the table, whether or not they have a roof over their head. They do not have to worry whether or not they can afford to go to the doctor and pay their medical bills. These are the concerns that we have. These are the things that we're trying to get Americans to understand. And this is why we will continue to fight to try to get our House Republicans to understand that they are part of a big lie. Donald Trump is lying when he tells you that he was not going to do this, that he was not going to touch Medicaid. The House Republicans are lying when they tell you that that is not going to impact Americans. Believe me, we will hear it down the road, the effects that this bill will have. We must stop them from being able to pass it. I urge all of my colleagues to vote no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Congresswoman Cole. So we are here at the 11th hour, appealing to just 4 Republicans.
Yes.
Just 4 Republicans we need to side with the people of the United States of America. We have with us a great representative from New Jersey, Representative Rob Menendez.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks to all my CHC colleagues for being here today. I think when you hear 17 million people are going to lose health care, you see that it's not just in places like New York and New Jersey, but it's in Florida and Texas, across the country, in blue and red districts, and why this bill should be problematic for all members of Congress, not just Democrats. And as the chairman said, we only need 4 Republicans to acknowledge the harm this is going to cause and vote in favor and in honor of their constituents by voting no against this bill. And for the American people, they hear Democrats and Republicans tell 2 different stories. But think about on immigration when President Trump said that he was only going to deport criminals, right? Well, we've seen every day in our communities that he's casting a wide net that has included citizens here who have been detained, apprehended, people here who are on visa status, people's families being torn apart who have no criminal record. So we know that the president can't be trusted. We know that he's already lied on his signature issue that he ran on and has enacted during his time in office. And when it comes to a bill this big, it's clear that the president and Republicans can't be trusted. It's why every vote, every markup, every debate has happened in the middle of the night. It's why House Republicans have been told not to have town halls, because if they talk to their constituents, if they talk to the American people, they would know that this bill is deeply unpopular. So my point to the American people is just look at the track record of this administration. We will know that these people cannot be trusted. especially on something as monumental and important as people's health care, people's nutrition. These folks cannot be trusted. It's why we all will be voting no and making sure the American people understand what's at stake, because there's still time left to call the representatives that may be thinking about voting for this and telling them they're making a huge mistake. So thank you all so much, and appreciate everything that CHC does.
Thank you, Representative Menendez. Son 4 republicanos. Todavía hay tiempo para que 4 republicanos le den el voto para preservar el programa de Medicaid, el programa de cupones de alimentos, para asegurar que no haya la masiva deportación que propone y está llevando a cabo el presidente Trump y su administración, que no impacte dramáticamente y negativamente en nuestras familias. Preguntas, questions on topic?
So, you were saying that you need 4, and it's been 3 hours of holding a vote, and they're down from 9 to 4. Right now, there's 4 Republicans that are not really being convinced. But it seems like it happened in the Senate. It's just a matter of when. Eventually, they'll go into then, and they're just gonna go for yes. Or do you think you?
No nos damos por vencido. We don't give up. We need 4 votes. I know that in many other districts, there are hundreds of thousands of people that will lose their Medicaid, that will lose their food stamps, that will get severely hurt, that will be the victims of a weaponized immigration system. So we're hopeful and we're optimistic that 4 people will hold out. 4 people will hold out. And as we saw in the Senate, it was just 1 vote. In fact, it was just 1 vote to pass the bill out of this House. So we're waiting and we're optimistic and we're hopeful that those 4 will hold out. They will be the heroes of the American people.
Sí, en español.
Son 4 votos que nos necesitamos. Nos sentimos optimistas. 4 votos pueden hacer la diferencia. En el Senado tomó 1 solo voto y la vez que salió el proyecto de aquí fue por 1 solo voto. Esta vez hay 4 que hasta ahora se han rehusado de aprobar este proyecto por los daños que le va a causar a sus distritos. Gracias. Anybody else? Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.